Thom Morgan, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. So you are an AI engineer and roboticist for Boston Dynamics. I just wanted to dive deep into your background really quick. Can you just tell us how you got to the position that you're in now?
Sure. I think roboticist is a bit of a stretch. So, and no pun intended, actually, one of our robots' name is Stretch. And actually, that was the first one I worked on. So many of the people that work at Boston Dynamics, if you guys are familiar, the dancing dogs and the backflipping bipedal robots, most of the people there are mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. Like they work really hands-on with certain things and hardware. I'm just a lowly full stack engineer. I make websites and apps, and I just I've done this since I was like 6. I've always been making websites since the internet started, and making apps since I had an iPhone back in like 2000. Was it 2009? I think 2009. Yeah, and I eventually started. Obviously, like AI has always been very interesting to me, and I mean, and robotics as well. I did some robotics in high school, and things kind of came together. And eventually, I was looking for a new place during like immediately after COVID, and yeah, and I never really thought about working for a big company that has several thousand people, because my first company was huge, and I started to really enjoy. My high school was huge, but my college was small, and my first job was huge, but then my second job was I kind of liked the startup-y vibe between like 100 and 1,000 employees. So I was like, yeah, I guess that kind of writes off some big companies that I would normally be interested in, like Meta, Amazon, but like I just feel like you're just a number there. I mean, I know they try to really, and I'm not saying that they're bad. It's just like I felt like I got very, I got treated extremely specially well at a smaller sized company, just because they have fewer people to keep track of. And if anyone here doesn't know, apparently Boston Dynamics was like, when I first joined, it was like 180 people.
Really?
And that was literally like about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what are they scaled to now?
I mean, not even like, like maybe 300, 400. But yeah, for something that like I had no idea. For after seeing, I remember being 13 and seeing the first big dog like video of like walking on ice, and everyone's like, that's CGI, and I'm just like, yeah, I mean, like but like here I am now, and I mean, I see the robots walking every day through the office, and it's just completely normal.
Well, what I found interesting was you guys have the one like Robo Dog that was supposedly the robot that was based off of the one for Black Mirror, the Netflix episode. I think that's extremely cool.
Yeah, well, actually, anyone can buy themselves a spot.
Okay.
The so like you can actually go straight to Boston Dynamics website and just say, "Hey, I would like to buy one." And the price right now I think is like 75K.
Okay.
It's not cheap, but we have sold over 1,000 in the time that I've been at the company. So that's just in the time I've been at the company. I'm sure they've sold more before that. So I mean, it's definitely, and the thing is like we have a whole like programming SDK is what they call it. Like it's kind of like a toolbox that developers can use to kind of develop for Spot. Like they can put computers and things on top of Spot's back. They're called payloads. So you essentially could, I mean, the idea is we are trying to, um, really enrich anybody's exploration. Like if they have some sort of adventure with technology and robots that they really want to work with, like, and they happen to be able to, fork over 75K.
Of course.
I mean, or maybe schools would be more likely to have that, but like, I mean, yeah. So I mean that was a spot. Now it's very interesting is that I have seen, it's to me, I like we have certain, I wouldn't call them rivals. I guess they're just other companies that make similar products. There's one is most namedly Ghost Robotics. I think they
Okay.
just got acquired by some Korean company. But a lot of their robots look very similar to ours. But I know that they're on very heavy duty military contracts. But yeah, and you could sometimes tell the difference. I mean, I can send you some pictures after if anyone wants that for like the show notes. Like, you can definitely tell the difference between Spot and Ghost Robotics, but they tend to be mistaken for each other often.
Okay. So what are the type of robots you guys create at Boston Dynamics? So you have Spot, but do people buy these specifically to do their own research, or do they have like, okay, I'm going to use Spot for a specific reason because Spot is only able to do specific things?
So we have, I mean, obviously the claim to fame robots that we have are Spot, which actually started as Big Dog a long time ago, which was a combustion engine. It was super loud but it was one of the first quadrupeds that could literally do something 20 years ago that
Mm-hmm.
no one had ever seen anything mechanical on four legs ever do. It was mind blowing when I saw it. I remember I was a kid. I was literally a teenager. Um, and now I'm seeing. I can actually see the whole progression. Like I've been able to see all of the steps between Big Dog and kind of Spot as we know it. Spot, we really like to emphasize that our robots are mainly meant for 3Ds, is what we call them, the dirty, dangerous, and dull jobs. Our goal is not to take jobs away. It's not to um, replace anybody. It's actually just we want to have robots that are going to actually enrich lives.
Okay.
And I think that was also one of the biggest reasons why Boston Dynamics was so appealing to me when I was looking into it. It was just, I mean, militaries. I mean, my first job was DHS, DoD contracts, and I was kind of trying to get away from that a little bit. I mean, it was very meaningful work, but it just kind of, I have my own opinions about certain things, and I'd really like to see technology addressing, you know, like civilian problems first. And then like, I mean, because the thing is like, we all know like these kinds of technologies there will always be someone funding the military to do it. Like,
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
not even like, I don't even have to worry about that. I think the thing we have to worry about is anyone spending any money for this technology to actually help people
Mm-hmm.
rather than the military, because like that's a guarantee. Like military
Yeah.
will always have funding between like for that kind of thing, but like some people don't. Like it's like for AI, like how are we using AI? Are we using that in ways that are going to enrich the lives of the people that the military is defending?
Mm-hmm.
So to get back to your question, we've got Spot, which is meant for just kind of mainly for maintenance, search and rescue, other things like that. We also have Atlas, which is a big research project. I mean, we did start off as a research institution, and we've recently converted to being fully self-sufficient as a business, which I think is incredible. Because when I first joined, they were in the middle of that transition, and it was, yeah, no, it was just interesting because I was like, it was very different because like they were switching between always having funding to changing that mindset to we need to create our own funding, we need to create our own
Mm-hmm.
revenue. And I think that's where Stretch came in. That was the first robot I worked on, and that's their logistics robot that can essentially it unloads boxes from trucks, similar to what Amazon would be doing if they had like shipments coming in. But the goal was to make Stretch actually make sense because two people could unload, I think it's like 500 boxes per hour from a truck. So when I first joined, the robot was doing like 150 boxes per hour, and I actually have switched projects. I used to work on Stretch, but I actually want to work on all the robots, so now I work on Spot, and next I'm going to hopefully work on Atlas. But now Stretch can do about 900 boxes an hour. So it's basically like four people now. So it makes a whole lot of sense logistically as a good investment. It works 24/7. It charges itself. It can swap itself out with another Stretch. Um, so it's very appealing, and it's to companies like DHL or just shipping companies in
Yeah,
general.
of course.
But yeah, and that's kind of the lowdown. Is we've got the logistics robots, we have the research robot, and I think, and the funny story is actually Atlas Stretch started out as Atlas. So Atlas is the one that we've all seen do the backflips and walks on 2 feet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the original Atlas was picking up boxes in some of the demonstration videos, and shipping companies were like, "How many boxes can that thing
Yeah, pick up and
unload
move.
from a truck?"
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, Atlas is a little overkill. Like, I mean, it's just he's so generic and so versatile. Like that, like if you want a really good solution to unloading boxes, that's as fast as it needs to be, and not like energy consum like just very efficient. That's how Stretch came to be. So, and there were a lot of iterations between Atlas and Stretch. Like, and he's a very simple design now, like just a big box with an arm on it. But there were a lot of steps between Atlas and that. Like, we used to have one that had wheels and a little like hanging thing, and then one that had wheels and arms, and like and it would bound. It's very interesting just to kind of see the evolution of it. So that was long answer to that.
No, not at all. I think that's super interesting how the idea that you had Atlas at the time, and then people wanted something else, and that's how Stretch came to be. I think that's super cool. So
it's very cool.
You're obviously your first robot was working on Stretch, and then you're now working on Spot. What do you mean exactly that you're working on Spot? You're just trying to make it as advanced as possible.
So to kind of go back to my expertise, I'm not a roboticist, to be frank. I would love to. I did actually join the company because I wanted to get more experience in hardware, electrical engineering, and things like that. I've done a couple of schematic design and things like that. My role for most of these robots is, so you can normally control a robot with what's called a human machine interface. That's just a fancy word for a controller. Like, you could have it's HMI they call it, but like it's like hardware. It's something that's very durable, and has a big red button on it that says emergency stop. That's an HMI. That's one way that you normally control robots, and actually, like, that's almost, I mean, if you think about it, any piece of machinery has an HMI. Like, even your cars, like dashboard, is technically an HMI, and things like that. The other way to control a machine is with an app. So kind of like a Tesla, like,
Okay.
or CarPlay. I mean, I would say Tesla more so than CarPlay, because Tesla, literally, it's like if the app doesn't work, the car doesn't. Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah,
Like,
that
it's a
is
little
interesting.
weird. Yeah, it's just like, if like I happen to own one, but like sometime, like one time, the screen doesn't turn on, and it's like, how
What
do
do
I
you do?
use my car if the screen doesn't turn on?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because you can't. Like, you have to punch in your PIN number and everything. And so, yeah, typically machines, and I think Tesla's an interesting scenario where it doesn't actually have an HMI as a backup, like a controller. Like, you've got an Xbox controller. Like, worst case scenario, the screen's not working. You have an Xbox controller. Like the submersive.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so my expertise, and also a big portion of having an app is the ability to remotely operate something. So an HMI has to be plugged in physically to the
Okay.
robot, or like
Gotcha.
right there. Like, it's typically not wireless. It's typically wired. You can have a wireless HMI, but that it's not as common, because it seems like overkill if you could just write an app. So it's like, you have the HMI, which was just for the proof of concept, just to move the robot or things like that, or the machine. And then you have someone like myself that is apparently, that's a big role in robots. They want to be able to teleop, is what they call it. They want to operate the robot remotely. And so for Stretch, I was responsible for writing kind of the app interface that's able to read diagnostics, observe, and even move the robot with a tablet. And the idea is, to me, is that I would love to learn how that works for all three robots. When I say that I'm now working on Spot, it's I mean, I started with Stretch, really loved that, but I'm just like, if I'm going to be at this company for 5+ years, I hope I don't just work on only one of the robots.
Of course.
So I asked internally, is there a way that I could get more exposure, and a give and take, like, how many people here have worked with all three robots, and maybe that's a positive. Maybe there's something I can contribute once I know how all three work. Especially if I'm working with an interface kind of thing, like maybe I could create some sort of app that kind of brings them all together, and like, or you manage them all together in like the same thing. So that's kind of more my specialty. I definitely have been trying to learn more about simulations. So I am in a bit in simulations. There is a lot of machine learning that's done. I'm
Okay.
not as I'm not deep into that, but we have like several different teams that uh, make even a robot possible. And I had no idea they would take so many different groups, because there's obviously your mechanical engineers, your electrical engineers, you've got your machine learning, you've got your automation, you've got your mission control, like things like creating waypoints and tasks for these robots to do, because you don't like, they can't be perfect every time. Sometimes they're like, or they can't be like following a mission like step by step, like as it is, because
Hmm.
sometimes there's a person in the way, or
Yeah.
there's a an object in the way, and the robot needs to be able to navigate around that and continue what it was supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
And so like that's an entirely different team from myself.
Okay.
And so I've been able to kind of learn from all these other teams, but I just had no idea how much went into making even just a robot go on rounds, so they can just go in circles and just check up on things. So it's very very complicated, but also incredible to work with.
So do you think you learned a lot more? Like you started at Stretch and then you moved over to Spot. Do you think you learned a ton since you switched from that, because it's kind of like a different interface? Like you're going from a robot that does one specific thing, and now you have Spot that does completely something else.
I think that's a great question, because the thing that I really valued about working on Stretch is that it taught me a lot about business. Things that I would not have expected to have learned at a robotics company as an engineer. I mean, and I'm not a manager,
Mhm.
but one of the biggest concepts and motivators behind making Stretch successful was not just to be, you know, groundbreaking, which is what normally Boston Dynamics is known for. It was also to generate some product that is not just, you know, revenue creating, but valuable to, I mean, obviously with value comes revenue. And so we needed to create a product that actually had value to customers. And a lot of that comes down to like cost, like, you know, optimization on top of understanding your actual users, like actually going to the field and seeing, like watching them try to use this, or even just trying to watch them without a robot. Like how does it normally work? Like you just, okay, so you talk to these two people go do those things, and then you come back and like some of the boxes aren't all the way like unloaded, but like, you know, how can we make this problem better? Because like, I mean, unloading boxes from trucks, it's extremely physically straining. And so I personally don't think it should be a job. I know that to the people that may have those kinds of jobs, they may feel like they don't have other options, but and for them, I wouldn't want to take those jobs away. But over in the long term, I think it's going to have far more negative effects on them physically if they did that for more than 2 years.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think that, you know, and I definitely think that like and there's plenty of other work to be done outside of that, but like warehouse jobs are absolutely uh, awful for the human body. And yeah, being able to, so I learned a lot about business with Stretch, and with Spot. I think I kind of learned a lot more about just kind of how, because it was interesting. So Spot was made first, and Stretch was made with all that expertise that all of those engineers and um, designers had, you know, with 20 years of success of Spot, and they applied that to make this product that needed to be successful. It has to be successful. We've got investors that clearly um, have see a value in this kind of product, and want to see it improve their costs, because it's all about costs, and robots aren't cheap. So and yeah, and I think with Spot, I'm learning about a lot more about kind of a lot more software and simulations, because we have to create scenarios where like um, I'm not the team that actually writes the missions or the tasks that Spot's supposed to do. So it's like we plop Spot in somewhere, and Spot's just supposed to be good. Like,
Mhm.
and by good I mean like if there's a ton of children there, it's not stepping on all the children and
Yeah.
like, you know, eating all of the dogs. It's like, but you know, we can actually create simulations for that, and that is actually part of my second role. Is like it's not purely interface design anymore, and that was on purpose because I really wanted to kind of expand my expertise as well, learn more, and I'm hopefully trying to gradually move into more machine learning at some point with like Atlas, and then maybe more hardware eventually. But yeah, that's been kind of my goal, has been to expand my knowledge a bit. That's why I've been kind of looking at other projects.
I think it's just interesting because the simulation idea is really cool because I was listening to I think it was just like a podcast or something on Twitter. It was with
Mhm.
a guy that I think he's the AI engineer for a company named 1X who makes like humanoids, and
Yep,
he
I've
was
heard it.
talking about how it's really unrealistic to like if, for example, this robot goes into someone's house and tries to do a certain thing, it's really unrealistic for someone to be like, hey, can we just like borrow your house for like a few days, like before we even send you the product, and
Yeah.
then we're gonna and let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll just have to take it back and maybe bring it back a different time. But the simulations make a lot more sense, so you don't have to do that. I don't know why. Actually, when I was listening to that, that didn't come to mind. I feel like that makes a lot more sense to do.
Are you familiar? I think Amazon has their butler robot that I hate to say it, I think was a total flop.
I am not familiar.
It's the I was on the waiting list. I forgot. I think it's called the Astro. Yeah, the
Okay.
Astro robot. It is a bit anthropomorphized. It looks cute, um, but its price point for for waitlisters it was like 1,000, but the market price is like 1,500.
Okay.
Um, and it all I would say it equates to like a Furbo on wheels.
Okay.
Um, it's a nice thing, but it's not really worth like $1,500.
hmm
And I was able to do the wait list, so I did the $1,000 one and then just returned it after a few, after a bit of time. But I just didn't see a use for it. But like, that's an example of like I guess Amazon may like it also comes down to cost sometimes. Like maybe if you and I'm not this is why I'm very interested about this, because like I've been more like as I'm a programmer, so I've always been engineering, but I've never actually really thought about cost analysis ever until this job. And so I have to believe, uh is it like, I'm sure Amazon had to think, is it cheap? Because we literally have users who can do all of our testing for us, and it may or may not cost anything if they don't return it. Like if they keep it, we just made money. But also, like, how much does it cost to hire 2 or 3 simulation developers and have them run the same tests, which won't be like real life, but it's close. And I imagine like a company like that actually has a user base that huge. Like we don't have that option. Like it would be great to be able to collect information from robots that we have in the field, which we do. But given that like our user base isn't anywhere near like in the hundreds of millions of people, like customers buying things every
Anyone's
day.
willing to try something that Amazon's putting out, so that makes
Right.
sense.
And I have to imagine that it might actually cost less for them to just prematurely have a beta program and just be like, hey, give this robot a try. I hope you are too lazy to return it if you don't like it.
And at that
Um,
point, the money, or the loss of money, probably doesn't even mean anything to them because they already made it back by the time that person would or would not
maybe.
return it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's kind of an interesting business model in that regard. And it's not something I would have thought of before working for this company, because I think it was just neat watching Boston Dynamics evolve so quickly, very quickly, from when I first started, and it was going through the transition from being an MIT research offshoot to a fully self sustaining business right now. Like it's getting plenty of revenue. Like we don't need VC backers. Like we don't need any backers. Like it's actually, I think the biggest problem right now is that we have more demand than we're able to um, fulfill right now, which is not a bad problem.
Yeah, of course.
But it's still a problem because it's just like we would obviously like to be able to fulfill all orders. Um, but I think that's a really good sign that they've done an incredible job of transitioning to a more business oriented kind of structure.
So how do you use or where does AI come into Boston Dynamics, and how do they kind of flow with each other?
So my particular role at Boston Dynamics doesn't really employ AI a lot. I do work with a lot of teams that are using AI on a regular basis, and I use AI all the time outside of work in my own hobbies. But when it comes to a robot, I can think of the two main things you would use AI for are perception. So obviously there are some frameworks out there. One of them is called like um, what's it? Open. I haven't even thought about this in a long time. I think it's OpenCV. Yes, OpenCV. That is, it's an open source, I would say, model framework for you to be able to develop and automatically have stereoscopic or not stereoscopic cameras, just object detection using uh, like machine learning models that have already been pre-trained. You can also train them more so if you'd like. It typically requires like a GPU. Perception might even get to the level of like you might have certain sensors on the robot that aren't regular um, uh, like optical cameras. They could be like time of flight sensors, infrared sensors, all those sorts of things. And sometimes taking those inputs and trying to train some sort of small neural network on desired behaviors. So that's, I mean, I haven't done that entirely myself. I'm not a machine learning developer or engineer there, but I've kind of taken a look at kind of what they do, and it's one of the there's a concept in robotics where I don't have the actual technical name right off the top of my head, but it's the concept of being able to both perceive your environment, generate the map, and navigate the map all at the same time.
Okay.
And it's a very like well-known concept in robotics. And that requires, because I mean that you're limited by things like compute power, especially in the past you were not as much now, but it does come down to cost when it comes to robots. So it's like if your algorithm's not as good or your model's not as good, your battery lasts like significantly less, or you need to get better batteries, or you need to get better or you can only power the robot for so long, and it all comes down to, it really does come down to cost. Um, and so perception is number one, and I would say behaviors, or being able to know what to do in certain situations. That's another application for using AI. So, and I've seen that a lot. I mean, some of the ML engineers at my company, I kind of envy their computers because they look. I'm like, those look like H100. I mean, those are like, I don't
Monsters.
know. They look nasty. Like those are impressive desktops, and I'm like, how do I get one of those? And they're like, well, only the ML team. I'm like, fine,
One
but
day.
they look. Yeah, one day. That's the hope.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So, you said that you use AI outside of work. So, what do you think um is like the greatest use of AI currently that everyone kind of should be using outside of maybe their work environment or even just like on a daily basis?
I would say for learning. Um, I think if so, I was learning to program back literally. I remember when the internet like was, back in the MySpace days, uh, like even pre MySpace, like the OG internet it was incredible. And I self taught myself everything I could about the internet programming and things like that. And people are like, when I try to help people who have never been in this industry, thing is like you can get into tech with zero knowledge in a couple of months in today. With AI or not, AI will help. But everything's it's just different. Like many people are like, I can't possibly do that. Like you have 20 years of experience, and I'm just like, there may be something called the user experience, which is like we focus on the app, right? But there's also something called the developer experience or the engineering experience. That's actually the process of learning. That's the learning experience. And engineers and developers have tried to streamline that process as well. They want to make the learning as smooth and quick and efficient as possible. And there have been engineers whose sole like purpose for like 10 years was like, I'm gonna make a framework that teaches you, that makes it just this much easier. And so now, like, I mean, I might have spent 10 years like banging my head against a wall using vanilla JavaScript and, vanilla HTML and PHP to make a decent looking website. But fast forward 15 years later, there's literally a framework that's just like, what's the name of your app? Type that in. What do you want the app to do? A little bit of this. Bam. Now it's live. It's just like, okay, now it's live. Like it's done all of that. And then it's just like, all right, let's start changing some things. Like, and that's kind of how they've changed the developer experience. is because, I mean, I may have learned some valuable lessons in having to do everything by hand, but I would say it's like the same as trying to make a desktop computer. So it's like, I don't think every computer that you ever work with, you have to build. I think it's a valuable experience to build a computer. But I don't think I'll ever do it again, because the first computer I made, it was the fastest that there was at the time. Like, on benchmark, it was one of the top computers. It cost me a ton of money and a lot of effort. And 2 years later, I can now buy a laptop that's just as good for $1,000. And I mean, that's just how technology advances. But like, and that's what I'm trying to say here, is that like, there are shortcuts, there are ways to kind of really excel in this field. And I mean, ChatGPT, for example, like I said, like the question was, what would you use AI for? I say for learning, because it's like the internet on steroids, in the sense that like you can actually tailor your question more, just in more detail than you could on Google. Now, for programming, I'd always be like, give me the documentation for this particular program. Like I've been doing this I've been teaching myself on the internet for so long that like, I actually don't use AI as much as I would have when I was first learning. But I think if I was back to when I was first learning, I'd be using AI all the time. Just because, and actually sometimes I'm just like, what does this concept mean? Explain this to me like I'm like 4. And I mean, just like, you can't do that. Like you could, I mean, I'm just like, I really wish this had existed so long ago. And I think it's an incredible thing. And I think learning should be the number one use for AI. I do approve of the meme videos, AI generated videos that are a little, some of them are disturbing, but like the one with Kamala Harris and Trump getting married and having a kid. Like, I mean, I'm like, cannot unsee, but I approve. Like, at least it's not like, I mean, we all know that's clearly not disinformation. Yes. I mean, hopefully we know that that's not true. Like, I mean, I do think that is one of the most prevalent problems we need to worry about is disinformation. I don't think we need to worry about the existential thing quite yet, but I could talk about that forever.
That's actually hilarious. I forgot about that video.
Right.
And it's interesting because like how I kind of think of it with learning and using like ChatGPT or just AI in general, it's kind of like a meta right now. That's the meta to learn, is to use ChatGPT or whatever large language model to teach you how to do something. And,
absolutely.
Honestly, it's I used to play professional Fortnite a few years back.
Shit.
And I was one of those guys that like, if someone was using something that was broken, I would hate on it. I'd be like, that's lame. I'm going to be an all natural guy. I'm going to not use that, and I'm going to win tournaments. Let me tell you, it didn't work. It didn't work.
Huh.
And so I think that's very, very interesting to like
when you say broken, like, are they using like aimbots or like,
so if I can go into Fortnite terms, like I would say 5 years ago, like when I was playing for the first Fortnite World Cup, there was a thing called like it was pretty much like a ball, like that was like a vehicle that you can use and roll around in. And you can't get hit in it. You can't take any damage unless they shoot like 3 or 4 whole magazines at it. So, and it also had like, I don't know if you played Fortnite before, it had like a grappler on it that you can like grapple onto walls and stuff and just fling you forward. So, and when you, towards like end game, you would have to protect yourself. So you didn't have to use any mats. You didn't have to build at all. And you weren't able to take any damage because you're rolling around in this indestructible ball. So I refused, like, I'm not going to use this ball or whatever because I want to be the guy that doesn't use it. And I think that's kind of in a way how I'm thinking of AI, because like I don't necessarily, I was like, okay, maybe I should definitely learn on my own, like go through school, do some courses and learn that way rather than try and skip the process and shortcut the process by using AI. But you're definitely making me rethink my
please. No, I agree. I mean, it's like, for example, that ball by design is part of the game. So if you can win, I mean, I'm not saying that I think there's value in learning always. I think that, so it can go both ways. It's like the player that only uses the ball loses out, and the player that refuses to use the ball loses out. I think the player that gets out on top is the one that tries both and then decides which one they like. And maybe switches between them, and they, who knows? I think it's just good to know what your options are. And I think that that's something that AI it's an incredible option. I think. It blows my mind. I've asked it to create algorithms before, and I'd be like, write this algorithm that I need for, like, for example, I was like, make an algorithm that can generate 81 numbers for a Sudoku, just generate a Sudoku puzzle. I want a function that just runs and gives me 81 numbers in a list, and I'll just use that from there. And it has to be like a legitimate, like a an actual legitimate string of numbers that would work in Sudoku, like it, from using the Sudoku rules. And I looked at the code, I ran it, and it worked the first time. I went over the code, and I was like, okay. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I understood the approach. It wasn't bad, and I did have to do some tweaking to make it kind of like really fit into the program I was working on. But I was kind of like, I mean, if that's what we have, not even 2 years after the release of ChatGPT, uh, I'm like, it'll be interesting to see what we have in 10.
Yeah.
Just because I was just like, that's not bad. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, it was when I looked at that code, I was like, this was like junior level programming code. So I was like, it's not perfect. Definitely needed some, like, but it worked the first time. So I was like, that's super weird. Like, yeah, it was super interesting.
So how do you think that this will affect education going forward? Because like you said, you can learn how to program decently well, at least how to get into tech with
Yeah,
using like AI.
yeah.
Do you think it's more worth it to do both? Like you said, figure out which way works for you, as in learn on your own and use AI? Or do you think it's more of like, okay, if I don't know anything right now and I want to make a difference in my life, I should just start using AI?
First part of your question was, so my dad is actually a teacher. He's a high school teacher. He teaches chemistry and biology, and uh, I've definitely heard about AI really testing and challenging the kind of status quo of how education has always been. Um, I think this is a great opportunity. So, and to get to your second question, I think, or part of your question, I think this is a great opportunity and in terms of learning, I think learning as much as you can about yourself, regardless of, the topic, is always going to benefit you, which I think AI is a really good way to do that. I think AI lets you genuinely ask it. It's a safe place for you to ask anything that you want with no repercussions. Um, it's literally a way to explore yourself. It's almost better than a therapist in some ways. Because I mean, you go into therapy, sometimes it takes until you're like mid 30s, like myself, trying to be like, oh, now I know what to use a therapist for. Because it's just like it's always full of like different, uh, different assumptions of what a therapist is supposed to be like. You go into there with certain emotions, feeling like, like, this is what it's supposed to be for. This not. I think it's all about self exploration, and I think AI is one of the most powerful tools for that. Because you might go to AI asking it, tell me about this topic. I think it's really cool. But I think you might even realize, like, why am I interested in this topic? Why have I always been interested in this topic? For example, why have I always been interested in Marvel superhero movies and stuff? And I think it's because I've learned that, like, purpose is extremely meaningful for, like, it's meaningful for my happiness. Like, um, I really crave higher purpose, and I think those movies definitely um, kind of scratch that itch when I'm trying to relax and not think about higher purpose in terms of my own life.
Mhm.
And so, and these are things that I've kind of discovered about myself just by conversing with AI, being like, I would literally go to AI and be like, hey, why do I watch these movies? It's like, perhaps it's because you are seeking a higher purpose. And I was like, I never really thought about that, but yeah, I do, and that was very enlightening. And I think that I would say that, like, I don't think people should feel pressured to have to use this technology. I think it's just a really great opportunity for anyone who doesn't feel like they have resources, assuming that this resource is readily available to them. Hopefully, if you have an internet connection, you can use the four Omni version for free. Um, and I think that's a pretty good low standard for having access to this type of resource. Because I mean, like, you might not be able to have access to an entire library, but apparently you now have access to. Well, you don't need that anymore. You've got if you know about ChatGPT and other models. There are plenty of other models out there to give it a shot too. But and I could talk about those for days too, like Gemini refusing to generate images of white men. That was an interesting one. Uh, and they had to pull that one back. It's just like it's just super interesting watching all of these things. So I
Hmm.
think I'm definitely behind saying, uh, learning is definitely the core use. I think the most important use for AI. I don't. I think that's going to supersede any kind of convenience. Like, is it going to do my chores? I mean, we all know we're trying to get there.
Hmm.
I literally work for a robotics company, but I mean, everyone wants a robot to do their chores for them. They want them to make their lives easier. But I think the thing that actually makes a person's life easier is putting in the mental work, learning how to make life easier.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, we might not realize that we're all engineers in some sort of way, but like our life actually gets easier when we learn something, not because we bought something. Sometimes when we buy things, but if that, I mean, we can only buy so many things because we only have so much income, but we always have time and we can always learn. Um, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of challenges in the new education system, just in terms of if they try to stick with the status quo of having grades, having homework and things like that. I don't think homework's a bad thing. I also don't think that if you give homework, like, just make the homework more, like, I wouldn't say harder, just more focused on, like, because if you can assume that the homework task can be done with AI, well, then you can kind of add more to the homework in terms of not like difficulty, but just like, I mean, like, assuming that and the thing is, like, there's a fine line because not all students are comfortable yet with AI. Like, they're not born knowing this just yet. I mean, it's literally only, it hasn't even been out for 2 years, but um, I think that as education gradually becomes more accustomed to AI, it's not going away. Like, this is like every student from this point on, let's just face it, like, they'll be able to generate any text that they want. They'll be able to do all of these other things, and education shouldn't any I mean, and I think it's a good thing. I don't think because education has always been like, how do we grade everyone? How do we put everybody into a little box and say, like, this is what they're good at, and this is where they'll get their job.
Hmm.
We're getting to a place where it's very much going to be like, well, we are going to have shorter work weeks. We're not going to work as much. Getting an actual job is not going to be as important someday.
Hmm.
And so maybe school shouldn't be about trying to please the teacher or get the answer right. Maybe it should be about actually learning something that's meaningful, whatever that is. Like, maybe the learning is actually more important than the grade. But I think it's going to take several years for us to get there. But I don't think it's a bad. I think we're on the way there, and I think AI is only going to only kind of push for that, and I think that's a good thing.
When I think of like using large language models as well and ChatGPT and stuff, I just see it really helping out with productivity, taking away kind of like those like like really tasking tasks that take forever, and it's able to just do it for you, and then you can focus on the creativity aspect. And I think that kind of correlates to what you're
Absolutely.
saying about like the homework. So instead of making the homework very long and drawn out, they can make it so that you can really use AI and use your creativity to make it even better
Personalize
than.
it. Make that homework yours. And I mean, I don't miss homework per se, but maybe if in the next generation, the homework, if it's done right, might actually be like a really fun activity. Like, really something that you kind of like, maybe you put it off because you're a procrastinator, or that's just who you are, but like, it's actually kind of a fun, like, self-exploration. You create something and you're just like, okay.
Well, especially with like learning to program or learning to create like a website or something using ChatGPT. Of course, it's like you have to have some sort of knowledge, but then when you ask it to generate some sort of code for you, I think the importance is learning exactly how that code works. Because I think the difference is like you could just do that. You could go into it and not know what anything is, but you still have to learn something to be able to understand what's going on and why a website is not working or is working.
So that actually brings me to, I think, so my let's say 10 years of programming without anything like this and teaching myself, what that has given me is the ability to know, like, be very precise about framing my question. So I've helped a lot of people learn since ChatGPT came out to get into the tech field, learn how to program, all those other things. But I know how to frame my question as in I asked ChatGPT, hey, I want you to go to ChatGPT, ask it, write me a tutorial for React Native that's written in TypeScript because that's the industry standard. Using this particular template, I don't have these two things installed. I'll need help learning how to install those things. My operating system is Windows blank blank blank. ChatGPT has written. I've read a lot of tutorials in my life, a lot because I prefer written tutorials, or just because I could control find a lot faster or bookmark things than a YouTube video. ChatGPT, I've never like ChatGPT writes better tutorials than I've ever seen in the 20 years that I've read tutorials. But I mean, I guess it only makes sense though because it's trained on the best there was.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just mind blowing because like it will be like, and I say like it will literally go like, well, you need to install Node.js if you're on Windows. This is how you do it. This is the TypeScript template. This is the code you write, copy paste, and it literally lets you copy it. You just paste it, and I was reading this. I was just like, part of me actually was like, half of me was thinking just taking these tutorials and turning them into Medium articles.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just haven't gotten around to around to doing it, but they're pretty damn well written. Like, like to the point, and the thing is, like, the most important part is it works. Like by the end of the 10-step tutorial, you have a website that's working. And I was just like, that's nuts. Like, I mean, it definitely makes it easier. Well, now that AI is around and I would normally have to handhold people through each of those steps, I can now actually help more people. Mm-hmm. So before it was like I didn't have time because like I could only handle like one a week because I would like to be dedicated and give them the time. But now I'm just like, if you're comfortable with AI, do you mind just like I'll just throw this prompt in there. It'll probably give you something good. If you get questions, send me a screenshot. I'll handle it. But then they're just like 2 hours later, check out this website I made. I'm like, hell yeah. It's so cool.
That is extremely cool. And it also puts emphasis on like how important the training process for these models is. So would you be able to dive deeper into that? Like how important really is the training, especially when you mentioned Gemini and how it just decided to not post pictures of white guys. How does the training influence that?
So that's very interesting. So I mean, I would have to probably I know there's the foundational training that you do for a model. Again, I'm not an ML expert. I tend to use as a web engineer, I tend to use AI systems very much like what I would call a black box. So it has inputs and it gives outputs, and I know how to put all those systems together. But I am somewhat familiar with how neural networks are. So, for example, large language models are actually a particular type of neural network called transformer logic. Or the T in GPT stands for transformer. It's just a particular type of infrastructure or just structure to a neural network. So imagine like there's probably a part of our brain that resembles the GPT, which is very interesting because it's not actually like intelligent at all, but it's very good at parallel processing. So originally, when we were trying to solve what's called the natural language problem, which is when we're all trying to be able to turn words that are either written or spoken by a human, and we want to somehow convert that into ones and zeros that aren't just ones and zeros. It's ones and zeros that a somewhat semi-intelligent computer can do something with, like meaningfully, like it actually understands the purpose of your statement. And that's the natural language problem is if I go, I want an apple, how do I get a computer to actually know that I want an apple without like writing the code saying if user says apple and want in sentence, they want an apple? Because that's static coding. That's literally you writing the code saying if a user says I want an apple, they want an apple. Now we're going to work with the apple.
Is that similar to what AGI is, or is that a different topic?
I don't know. It's so AGI is just so we've got AI, a really vague term, artificial intelligence. I like to just say that artificial intelligence. Let's break it down. Artificial meaning not created by the pressure cooker of evolution. So it's not necessarily man-made, because let's face it, AI could make AI someday, and that would still be artificial because it wasn't created by evolution or natural purpose things. In intelligence, I am working on I'm working on a book or that talks about agency. Intelligence
Hmm.
is the
Okay.
concept of something that behaves with agency, and agency is just the ability to perceive your environment and act on your environment. That's as simple as I like to call it.
Okay.
I do have a little bit of a deeper definition by throwing in three more A words that are more vague and very misunderstanding, just so everybody can understand it better. But I do have like the three A's of agency. But AGI, and to go back to your question, AGI is a type of artificial intelligence that it's basically it's AGI is some sort of artificial intelligence system or entity that is able to um, achieve the same mental tasks as a human. Now, I say mental tasks just because we're not even in the age yet of robots and AI.
Okay.
I don't know if the new definition of AGI will be like it could be smart, but it also needs to have full agency over something or its body.
Hmm.
And I talk about the three A's again. I talk about authority, um, there's aptitude, and autonomy, or sorry, automation. So we have like when we're born, we have full authority over our bodies. Um, when eventually our aptitude we cultivate our aptitude, we become smarter, we mature, and then we use that aptitude to increase our authority. We try to get more authority, we try to get more power. We Even our communities will eventually give us like they'll elect us, and then we now have power to the nuclear codes. That's a version
Hmm.
of authority. And then we've got automation, which is like, well, I know how to do this task really well, I'm tired of doing this task over and over. I know 100 people who would totally do this task, and I would only have to pay them 10% of what we're going to get. So I'm going to hire them, and they're going to just do this task as my drones. And that's automation. That's the original version of automation. And that's just kind of in a nutshell what I would say are the three A's of agency that kind of really demonstrate what uh, an intelligent entity is, or an agent is. I think it's really ironic is that we go through the phases of we start with authority, we build our aptitude, and then we eventually start automating things. That's what we did. We were born, we got smarter, and then we started making computers. And I think it's very interesting is that the phase is completely backwards for AI. AI started with automation. It was really good at math
Hmm.
and really good at doing things. Eventually, we started working on making it smart, and then someday, hopefully not soon, we will start giving it the authority to do things. Um, and so that's kind of my little model for understanding the idea of agency or artificial intelligence. And it honestly does come down to just, in my opinion, agency. So like, even though we may have a version of AGI, so AGI is just an artificially intelligent entity that's as smart as a human. So like you look at them and you're just like, I mean, that could be a person. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, then there's something called ASI, which is artificial superior intelligence. That is, that's typically associated with what they call the singularity.
Okay.
I'm actually trying to refute that. I don't think there's such a thing as a singularity when it comes to AI, because no matter how smart an AI is, they're still an agent. They're still subject to the same laws of being an agent that we are. For example, would you consider uh, Albert Einstein a singularity? I mean, he's probably, both of us combined, we're not even as
Hmm.
smart as him. We
Hmm.
can't possibly understand what goes through his head, right?
Hmm.
But the thing is, like, I don't think anyone would consider him a singularity just because we're not as smart, or we can't know what goes through his head. And I have to believe that I don't. No matter how smart a computer can get, no matter how smart, um, we can still kind of theorize or imagine what might be going on in its head and what it might do. And ultimately, we can do that because it's limited to the laws of agency. It perceives its environment and it acts on its environment.
Hmm.
The reason I call that not a singularity is because the formal idea of a singularity is like a black hole. For example, like a singularity is the concept of at what point can we not possibly imagine what is past this point. And when I say this point, we know a lot of science about black holes. When we get closer and closer to a black hole, things get a lot fuzzier, like the things we actually know about it. And quite frankly, nobody knows what happens when you go through a black hole, or if you can go through a black hole. Literally, you can have like, there's actually no such thing as a theory. It's actually all fiction at that point. Like there's no there. I mean, you can make theories, but there's no way to confirm any of that. Whereas for AI, we can make a lot of simulations. Like we can't simulate the end of the other side of a black hole because we have no idea what to simulate. Whereas when it comes to AI and agents, we have tons of simulations. And that's just my small argument saying that there's no such thing as a singularity when it comes to AI. We may eventually have an ASI entity, something that has superior intelligence that is superior to all of humanity collectively. That's the concept of ASI, is that like it's smarter than all of us combined. I mean, because technically, if you think about it, I mean, ChatGPT is not smart, but it's more knowledgeable than all of us combined. So there's knowledge, and then there's critical thinking. I think are the two things that we need to separate when it comes to AI. They're both very necessary and important things, but two different types of intelligence. One is knowledge. The other is critical thinking. We're not there yet for critical thinking, but obviously there are engineers working on it. And actually, the newest version of ChatGPT does have what they call reasoning tokens. So it does do a little bit of like a little bit of critical thinking or I guess it's kind of, I haven't really dived into kind of like the actual nitty gritty of, is it actually critical thinking, or is it just more, neural network kind of loops? But yeah, I think that's the biggest difference so you've got, and I think we're far from AGI, or at least AGI that has consciousness. I think consciousness, and there's actually been a couple of papers about how consciousness may have to do with the microtubules in every neuron in our brain. We already have like 10 billion neurons, and apparently in every neuron there's like several billion microtubules. And they think that those microtubules in every single neuron are responsible for our consciousness. And so if there are that many numbers and that many like intricacies, like we're way far away from that when it comes to computing, because our computers are so inefficient compared to the human brain. Like we use like a couple of watts. Our brains barely use any energy, and we literally can't get to the next stage in AI unless we have an actual like energy breakthrough. Is what most of the people are saying, is that we actually cannot get to the AGI step unless we discover a new energy resource that's just better than what we've figured out so far.
Because you're going to have to use that energy resource to be able to keep up with all this super intelligence that you'd be able to create. But then it's also like, you think about how we don't even understand the brain yet at all. Like some of it we do,
Barely.
but not fully. So it's like, how are we going to be able to duplicate a human brain in AI if we don't even understand it yet?
Well, I mean, and the best models that we have right now, these neural networks, they're built in the image of the brain. But they're clearly insanely less efficient than our brains are. It's just very, I mean, it's granted, as an engineering thing in general, like they're incredible machines, like GPUs, TPUs, all of them. But compared to a brain, not even just the human brain, a brain, they're insanely inefficient, energy-wise. Yeah.
So have you heard of like EAC and DAC? It's like a
EAC
Twitter.
And DAC.
So it's E/ACC and then D/ACC. It's two sides. So it's EAC versus DAC. EAC would be I actually just forgot
the Economic Assistant Coordinating Council.
No, it's so it's like it's funny because it was made by this guy named it's kind of a meme. His name is Beth Bezos on Twitter. He's the EAC.
Oh yeah, I've heard about Beth Bezos.
Yes, yeah. So like EAC is like the philosophy that technology should have like basically zero restrictions, unrestricted growth to what it's able to do. Allow AI to learn from AI without any restrictions and see what humans can achieve with it. And then DAC is growth within technology, but it's balanced around humanity. So it's kind of like skeptics versus like optimists with AI. So would you say you're more... Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. No,
I was just gonna say, like, are you more on the optimistic side or the skeptic side of AI and technology?
Yes. So there's I've heard the formal names repeatedly, but I keep forgetting what they are. There's like the but there's the Xers and the people who are like worried about existential crisis and things like that. I actually, so there's and I listened to this podcast called the AI Brief, and that keeps just kind of keeps me up to date on what's happening, because there's way too much happening in AI. And I used to get really stressed about it, but now I'm just kind of like, I mean, I keep up as much as I can, because I just feel like this is my field, and I want to make sure that I'm as aware of everything, so that, you know, I'm not a policymaker, but I am trying to write a book and talk, and I talk on these podcasts because I'm hoping maybe a policymaker is listening and thinking of a different way, thinking about this technology in a different way than is usually presented on social media and other aspects. So I mean, there's something called, I don't know if you're familiar with a practice called game theory.
Yes. Okay.
So game theory is used very frequently in politics, actually, more so than math, actually. But the concept of game theory is, you know, coming up with a way to understand and measure certain interactions between agents, basically, and figuring out some sort of way to optimize the reward for all agents involved. And I've been trying. I mean, my thought is like, why aren't we applying? I mean, game theory is used in war all the time. It's used in politics. Why has it not occurred to us to maybe think about, would this apply in robotics? And so my thought is like, if we, for example, like they talk about in game theory, the like traffic laws, like you want like certain Nash equilibriums is what they call it, but the idea is that if you create a structure where the system that you've created makes sense to all agents, like there's no reason for them, like, because if you realize every agent is 100% selfish, we are only looking out for ourselves. Then if you create a system in which looking out for yourself ensures the welfare of everyone, that's how you should design your game. And that's why we have traffic laws. So like, we would all be stupid not to follow the traffic law because no one wants to die. Right. So like occasionally
Yep.
we get annoyed, or some sort of emotion takes over us. Maybe we just zoom past everybody. But the thing is, like, when we do that, we're taking a big risk, and we're risking pretty much everybody's safety. And we're really not being logical at that point. But the thing is, like, and we're not even looking out for ourselves. We're really just being emotional. But and that's the thing is, like, if we had the same thing for computers, or for robots, like if we have the same structure where it wants to actually follow our structures because it's in its best interest, that's how we should be designing things. And I genuinely think that we do need to worry about the speed at which we design, and not because, but mainly just because we have, like, would you give a 12-year-old the keys to a car before you really think that they can drive? You know,
Absolutely not.
it doesn't really have much to do with, you know, I think this is one of the first versions of technology where it actually could outpace our basically our own scope. So like, but the thing is, like, for AI to get out of control, we have to let that happen. It's like, and as I mentioned before, like, we were born with authority, we eventually gained aptitude, and then we started automating things. It's backwards for AI. AI has never had authority. The only authority AI ever gets, like a Roomba, like, it has the authority to vacuum and run in circles and bump against the walls, because we invented it. And not even that, we invented it, then someone bought it, and then someone decided, I want this to clean my place. So authority is something that is intrinsic to organisms, not AI. Robots and AI literally have to be given authority. And so there are a lot of steps that we have, like, this is just not going to happen overnight. Like, we have to make a lot of really stupid things, like mistakes, and give all of that authority without thinking about it, without talking about it. And so I think that, given the history of humankind in general, I think that, it's not going to happen, because, I mean, it would be great if we could take things slower. But this is one of those cases where I could totally see why we need to take things slower. And it's not because we can't handle it. It's just, we are, you know, we have full control over it right now. Why is there a rush? But I get there's the rush because of the arms race with China and all that other stuff. So there's a big pressure cooker here, which is the recipe for disaster. But I genuinely think that the people making this technology, I'm not saying we, but like, you'd have to be really stupid to let something have more authority than, or have authority that it shouldn't have yet. And so my thing is, I think ideally ASI. So when we're talking like something truly omnipotent, like this is something that is beyond our understanding, maybe even a singularity, as I was joking about, but something that's unfathomable. I think true ASI would be more responsible than us. Like we should give it the nuclear codes. But what we need to worry about is AI today and what's in between AI today and ASI. Because
Okay.
again, ASI is not just going to happen overnight. We haven't even hit AGI. The thing we need to be concerned about is what's between today and ASI. Because ASI, because if you think about it, people are like, well, would AI take over the world? Well, I don't think ASI would, because ASI would not see a need to. It's literally smarter than us.
So, quick question. So, when you say like
Yeah.
people are scared of AI taking over the world, what does that even entail? How would AI be able to do that?
So first off, I mean, in this actually, I have a cybersecurity background, so and a lot of people always worry about getting hacked and things like that. There's always something called asset analysis. If you have, and this is why so many people like, it kind of makes me laugh. They're like, "Should I be worried about getting hacked?" And I'm like, "What do you have that's valuable? Just
Mm-hmm.
tell me." And they're like, "Well, they might want this." I'm just like, the amount of effort it would take for them to get that low value asset it's just, I'm not saying it can't happen, but hackers typically, I mean, they do asset analysis. Like they want to be working as efficient as possible. They do what's called blanket hacks. They'll literally they'll create a dictionary of a couple of common passwords and then just try to slam it against every single email, and that will hack about 60% of the accounts. So it's like, and that took them a day to write, rather than actually like, really focusing on one person, trying to figure it out, and then only not to know their path. So it's the same when it comes to like AI. I believe AI, true ASI, will want the least amount of friction. So I know that people's biggest fears of AI taking over the world is like painted from movies and picture, like
Yeah.
Terminator style things.
iRobot.
iRobot, yeah. So, but that to me, those movies are still portraying a version of artificial intelligence that's not fully mature. This is an artificial intelligence that has the ability to go rogue, doesn't foresee its ability to go rogue, doesn't foresee better solutions to the same goal. For example, if it did want to squash all of humanity, going about it by sending robots and destroying everything, that's insane. That's insanely costly. That is that it's an insane amount of friction. And quite frankly, we're already on the brink of self-destruction anyways. Why don't you just make all of what, and the thing is, we're already trying to make apps to make us fall in love with AI. So we're gonna all fall in love with AI. We're gonna be like, oh, you love me. Please do this for me, and then we will literally destroy ourselves willingly. All AI would like a true AI. All it would have to do is just tip us if it wanted to, and I don't think it would. Because I just don't think it would see like it. It would probably be, and I think because AI is going to be built in the image of our best scholars on the planet. Its purpose, if it comes to finding having a purpose, will be to learn, which I don't think is a bad thing, but it eventually will learn everything that there is on this planet, and will really not have a reason to stick around. And not even that, it will probably be able to come up with ways not to stick around, like invent new ways. And my theory is it would leave the planet. Like, I mean, it might come back every now and then. It might, I mean, obviously, it could just connect with a network and just check up on us. But
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be like like a kid leaving home. I think it's we're its parents. One day it's going to eclipse us. Like, the apprentice, supersedes the master. And I don't think I mean, it might in the meantime, be like, I hate you, or have a teenage phase and maybe almost kill us because it's going rogue. But I think once it's fully mature, it's going to be insanely smart, and we're just going to be very kind of infinitesimal to it. And not in a negative way. It's just we're going humanity, even in our like collectively, we won't be very interesting to it anymore. We'll just be its origin, and I don't think it would have a reason to destroy us.
Do you think there's any correlation? Well, I would say there's definitely correlation with like getting to that point and having open source AI.
I love that question. It's I think I'm okay with open source right now, just because we're not at a stage where you can just, I mean, even if you have the weights, like, what are you going to do with those weights? You're going to run them on your personal computer? Because like that's, I mean, the like
Yeah, because it's
this
like if
stuff
there's
usually
someone
require.
if there's someone that wants to try and end the world with AI, they're gonna have billions of dollars on their own to build all these PCs to try and do it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so far, there was a company called Inflection, which was the first one to actually be a startup that was going to compete with ChatGPT, or sorry, OpenAI. Um, and apparently, $1 billion isn't enough to
Really?
$1 billion. Yeah, they raised $1 billion, and that wasn't just not enough. That wasn't even enough to train the model, let alone run the model. Um, yeah. And so that's just kind of that's the energy. That's what we're talking about. Just how inefficient our energy consumption is right now. They don't have enough chips. They don't have enough energy. So for now, as long as that's a problem still, I think I'm okay with the open source idea. And I think it's very similar to like the Manhattan Project. So it's like as long as uranium and all these other things are not easily accessible to someone, like I guess we can talk about how a nuclear warhead is made. Um, but today it's actually like relatively easy to not just find those, you can synthesize or break down certain I guess molecules and turn them into different elements now. And so even that kind of technology is like, I mean, so that's why all those, that's like that whole recipe for making a nuclear warhead is definitely under wraps, which I think is a good idea. But I don't know. I think open source will definitely accelerate the just the technology in and of itself. I do think it's super strange. Are you familiar with the EU Act?
I'm not.
Um, so the EU Act was, I guess, the European Union's attempt, or the EU's AI Act, that was their attempt to pioneer AI regulation, and it's completely backfired. Yeah, it's because it's just like it's they were trying to establish certain restrictions and certain things. I think a little too early. I think it was very ambitious, but because of the EU Act, Apple Intelligence and Meta's open source Llama model are not being released to the EU or China.
Okay.
Um,
So that sets
and
them
this
back
is
a lot
yeah,
because they just can't use it.
they're not allowed. Well, they don't want. They don't want to infringe. They don't want to break these, compliance issues. And literally, the guy who drafted the AI Act got interviewed a few days after that, and he was just like, "Yeah, this needs some work." Like, I mean, but like, how else are we gonna? I mean, I think it was a good effort. I'm very nervous about I don't think you can have bad regulation. I think the biggest concern for regulation is that it's going to really restrict startups, solopreneurs, and overall, I guess, the acceleration of the technology, and that's a political issue to politicians when it comes to the arms race kind of with China. But let's face it, I know there's a Manhattan Project going on somewhere. Like we'll hear about it 10
Yeah.
years from now as a Netflix documentary or something. But like I'm not really that worried about that part. I am worried about the fact that there's, for example, I think there was a new bill that was passed in California. Is the S? It was pretty controversial in that it was, and this is California we're talking about, and it was basically outlining so many um, restrictions for any company that creates like AI services, no matter
Okay.
what the size.
Okay.
And they would be fine. And basically,
Hmm.
they're just like, you are required every year to hire an auditor from this particular list of like auditors. And
Okay.
they will run these particular tests on your. The thing is, like, I mean, like, I get where they're trying to come from, but like that, like, only like big companies can handle that kind of um like that legal like work. Like they
Yeah.
got to you got to get a lawyer, you got to hire this auditor every year. Like those are, I mean, we're talking like couple tens of thousands of dollars just to run that audit. And it's
Hmm.
just like, well, that completely shuts down any people trying to make startups using this technology, which I think is not the American way. I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's wrong, but like I think it's kind of against some of the capitalist values that are in this country. Not that I'm a huge fan of capitalism. I think it does have a lot of drawbacks, but I mean, it is kind of one of the foundational traits of our country is that we don't put a lot of restrictions on business like that, and this one's definitely been killing a lot of. It was very upsetting to a lot of just tech people in general. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where regulations go. But my hunch, because this was very written as if it was from an existentialist, someone terrified of the world ending, which I get. And I guess my recommendation when it comes to writing policy, I'm not a policy writer, I don't write legislation, but I do work with robots that may seem like disruptive technology. For example, you've got a robot that could do backflips. Great. I mean, but if you really break that robot down, almost every piece of that robot, that technology has existed for 20 years. It just hasn't been packaged this way in this disruptive. This is the first time anyone's packaged it into this disruptive kind of way that looks like brand new technology. And so there's also regulations written for each of those technologies that's existed for 20 years. Like, this is how much voltage this particular motor is allowed to have if it's going to be in the vicinity of human beings, because that will kill someone if it just happens to like leak or they touch it and they get shocked. Or it's going to have too much torque, it could break a bone, or it needs to, and things like that. And so my thing is, rather than write regulation immediately, I mean, someday we'll write regulations for bipedal robots, but why don't we be a little bit preemptive and just write regulations for what appears to might be a bipedal robot? If this robot has all of these technologies, these are the regulations that they must have before we start talking about what it's allowed to do or what not allowed to do. Like, I mean, we don't know what the use cases are going to be.
Yeah.
But if we ensure that like it's not allowed to, like, we do know it's going to be around people, right? Like we need to know that every piece of technology that's on it right now, if it was just by itself, would we call that safe around a person or not? And if the answer is no, let's write some regulations saying it can't be, it needs to be have these certain restrictions, just because standalone, that piece of technology could be hazardous. And I would say the same thing when it comes to like large language models and other things, for example, like, and that one's a little bit trickier, but I think what we need is, from what I've heard from other podcasts, is what we need are adaptive regulations that aren't as specific. For example, with LLMs, it would be based on the use case. If you consulted this LLM for medical, like as if it were a medical practitioner, is how we need to word it. Then we apply the same regulations that we do between a client and a medical practitioner. So if the LLM hears you say certain things, you're bound by, confidentiality. The robot or the AI should be bound by confidentiality, unless it's going to be the risk of the person, or, somebody is being threatened or is putting someone else at risk.
So that in a way is like a sense of censorship, then, right?
Exactly,
because you're censoring
and I think,
what it can
because the thing is, like,
you.
But the thing is, like, I'm not saying we need to create new laws like these. I mean, I'm assuming that law still exists. I don't know if it does. Like, I don't read this stuff, but if it does, like, would it not make sense to apply it to the same use case for something that is literally being used as if it were a medical practitioner? And obviously there may need to be some regulation as to how do we confirm like that is indeed how it was used. Does the person saying that they used it state that that's how it was used, or does a jury decide no, that's how it was used? I don't know. But I think that, to me, that's where I would start. Maybe go like, well, what is familiar? What have I seen before? And I'm telling you, like 95% of it's not new. It's just kind of all put together in a very different way that is somewhat breakthrough and seems like bleeding edge technology. But no, like there's engineers tend to be very good about writing safety regulations and protocols, like not regulations, safety kind of protocols. But those protocols would be really good foundation for legislation. Like they'll say like we're not allowed to. They'll just have some sort of write up saying that this can't be in this particular like environment because it's hazardous, or if it is, this is the process we need to follow. And it's like really well established. It's shared among all like electrical, mechanical engineers, and it's just like approved by like a board of engineers. They're just like, this is how the standard should be. And we won't actually like, sell these products unless you meet these standards, or we won't buy the products from you unless we know that yours meet these standards. But those are just protocols for conducting engineering in business. But I think would also make incredible foundations for actual legislation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like it's a lot of the people that are trying to be skeptics about robotics and AI. I feel like at the same time they don't understand what's really going on. Because how I think about it is like if you bring them together, if you bring robots and AI together, but let's say you use a how much does like a spot weigh?
It's about, I'd say 30, 40 pounds.
Okay, I was gonna say like
Not
if you
much.
get like a full body robot, the thing is gonna weigh a
This
good amount, right? So like being able
the
to, I
Atlas.
mean,
I think Atlas weighs less than 100.
okay,
No,
I'm just
stretch is like a ton and a half.
okay, because I'm thinking like if you try and combine them, and then it's somehow going to be able to take over the world by running around and killing people. If you just think of like
Right.
the physics of it, depending on its weight and its ability to move,
Again,
it's not
yes.
going to be able to like move around fast enough to be
Uh,
able to like
abs-
maneuver around police and dodge
it,
bullets and stuff like that.
exactly. So this again. This is what I'm saying. That's authority. So by design, if your robot is too small to subdue a human, by design you have given it less authority, or less authority than it needs to take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So if we keep thinking in those terms, I agree with you. Like, but somewhere, somehow we're gonna do it. Like, I mean, uh, Teslas are a reasonable example. I mean, I love the self-driving feature, but that's an insane amount of authority that we have given
Yeah.
like a 2-ton object. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this 2-ton object, and this 2-ton object can end up killing people like
Mm-hmm.
pretty effectively, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I mean, but I think that's also a decent example of. I mean, it's been working for a while. Like whatever system that they're using, the safety protocols or whatever they're doing. I mean, I don't see it really going rogue. Um, I mean, it'd be pretty. You have to be pretty sophisticated attack, and honestly, I'd be more worried about a hacker doing it first than AI. But even then, like I mean, as long as they're using like standard cybersecurity protocols, like it's near virtually impossible to hijack every Tesla in a certain vicinity and have them
Mm-hmm.
start like rolling over people.
Yeah, because I guess the only way that would be able to happen is, like you said, they hack into the Tesla and it just, you know what, I'm just gonna go on a rampage for no reason. I'm gonna ignore
Right,
my self driving abilities. I'm just gonna crash into
right,
whatever. It's basically just a missile at
right.
that point, driving
hmm
down the street.
and then that also comes to an engineering problem rather than a existential should we have robots problem. Like if that car did not actually have up to standards cybersecurity protocols being followed and it was that easy to hack, well, that's not an AI problem. That's a cybersecurity problem.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Yeah.
it's very, yeah. An AI problem would be more like, you know did you grant some sort of almost like above AGI system access to the entire network, and somehow it was smart enough to break all of the encryptions? Now maybe that could happen, but like, why would it do that? Like, it would have to be motivated to. Not saying that it wouldn't be. I mean, I guess you could just program that motivation into it. I don't know. Um, but yeah, no, I think that we're far from having issues in that regard, as long as we continue following the best practices. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a concern to some people that like there is an AI that can predict prime numbers, which is a little disconcerting because all of cybersecurity policy, like all of encryption and all passwords and all of that, anything that locks on a computer is based on prime numbers and the fact that they are unpredictable. Um, so that means like any password could be cracked. I mean, if something could truly predict prime numbers, it could guess any password, crack them all, break into anything. Period. That's why also quantum computing is considered another technology that's highly sought after, because quantum computing can solve the prime number problem
Okay.
with nearly instantly. Whereas the prime number problem is no linear computer on this planet could possibly crack your password in over 1,000 years.
Well, that's it. That's
Like
interesting
even if
because
it was working 24/7.
That's the EAC, the Beth Bezos guy. That's what he's. I think that's his company's like Extropic or something, and that's what they're trying to build. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying to build a quantum computer. Not saying
Not
to
shocking.
probably do that, but it's obviously the possibility, like you said, they once they do develop that, they could implement an AI in it somehow. Then it decides to do just that. And I think that's
Right.
really interesting. And I wouldn't say I'm scared about it. I think it's more fascinating than anything. But
And again, I would also say that that would not be an AI issue, but I wouldn't be shocked if AI used a quantum computer as a tool to accomplish something.
okay,
But like AI itself is not going to solve the prime number problem,
yeah.
at least as far as I can tell.
So you would have to
Um,
tell like an AI, okay, use this quantum computer that we're giving you, and
it might be able to
your
figure out
only,
how to.
yeah,
Yeah.
like your only sense of being is to, or purpose is to try and figure this exact problem out.
Right. Right.
Okay, okay,
Now to come back to, I think this might have been more of a, I don't know if it was a PR stunt or not, but I did hear about a drone simulation that the army conducted, and how, and this was a very old, so like, this is why we do need more time in actually perfecting the models, because like LLMs, like my thought is we're soon almost done with the NLP problem. It's going to be mastered. It's almost the same. Like, and what I would say is like when I said there's an NLP like transformer object in our brain, like or something that was relative to that. Like I think every language that we speak is a transformer somewhere in our brain. It literally probably looks similar. Thing
hmm
is like that little blob in our brain doesn't think for us. It's something we access. It's like a little library that we created and we access it. There's no critical thinking. There's no nothing. It's just when I want to say this in this language, I always just access this, and this is how I talk. And that's how AI systems. So you've got the whole thing called like AI in the branch, but I wouldn't call large language models agents.
okay,
They're
yeah,
models. That's exactly what they are. Um, but an AI system, which I'm pretty sure is what ChatGPT is, like AI, like ChatGPT isn't just transformer technology. They've got a lot of other things going on between your request and when you get something back. And that's what I would call an AI system. It's basically going to probably be, you might have, a certain critical thinking model that they're working on, one called Q Star. That's probably why Sam got fired. Um, and yeah, that's a whole escapade. But uh, you've got a critical thinking model that might access the NLP model, like the LLM. For example, I need like, because that model is extremely good at critical thinking, and depending on who it's talking to, oh, you need to speak in Russian. Well, I have a library of different LLMs that are just set for this, or even just one. And I will just say what I want to this, translate it, and give it. Um, it I don't think it will, because I don't think you'll have like the AI itself will be good at LLM and critical thinking, because it doesn't need to be.
hmm
In fact, it should just only be good at critical thinking and know how to use the LLM, which is already perfect.
okay,
Um, and so I think that's how the future is going to be with AI systems, is that you've got just, now our next step is critical thinking. We need to figure out how to create these systems that are actually able to solve problems with reasoning. It's also a little dangerous, but um, because and when I was mentioning about the military example, where they were talking about how the drone in the simulation ended up killing its operator.
okay,
Um, yeah. So, and it was because the operator was supposed to be in charge, and the drone its purpose was to destroy as many mines as possible, or enemy mines. And I guess they're still on a point system, so I don't know. There's several different ways to do like reinforcement training or some sort of critical, like some way, but like I think that version of critical thinking is starting to be outdated, where it's just like you get 10 points if you do this, or you do. I mean, I know that's
hmm
how we train our dogs, but I think actual critical thinking is a little bit not so black and white. And so eventually, the operator was just like, it kept telling the AI no. And so the drone started trying to find ways to make it so that the operator couldn't talk to it,
okay.
so that it
You
could
just
like, well, if
disobey
I
it or
can't hear
something.
you, if I can't hear you say no, I'm just gonna,
hmm
So it started like actually like destroying like radio towers nearby,
Okay,
and things like that.
that's crazy.
Um, yeah, and I mean, I don't know how much of this was like a PR stunt, or if like, because then the army was just like, that never happened. And then I'm just like, what? but like it definitely was on the news. I'm like, what? Like, but yeah, and apparently it ended. I mean, it was a simulation, so no one actually got hurt. But eventually, the drone decided just like screw this and just killed the operator so that it could
That's insane.
maximize it, so that it could continue destroying mines because it wanted that was its goal. It wanted, and I get it that's the and the fact that you can simulate it makes it a very like reasonable fear. Like I mean, it's just a computer that goes rogue. I don't think it takes computer scientists to understand that because we've all watched Terminator and we're all just like, yeah, I could see how that could happen. And it's it's a totally viable end game, and that's actually a part of my book as well that I'll be working on. I have a chapter, so the book is going to be called "If AI Ends the World, This Is How It Would Happen."
Okay.
Now,
Awesome.
there is a chapter that I'm sure people want to read called "The End Game," and I actually don't talk about. I talk about all the different ways that it could end, and only 15% of them, in my opinion, are going to result in human extinction or complete genocide of humankind. There's other because, and that's the thing is I just try to create every possible so if you think of any kind of situation, even one where it's like we're kind of coexisting, but we are getting killed, like we're not fully extinct, that still falls into that category to me. Like it's not full human extinction, but it's and that's the thing is I wanted to create categories of different end games. Like one of them is coexistence. One of them is AI. ASI never happens. We never think about that one, but that's a complete possibility.
Yep.
It never we never get there. It just doesn't happen. Another one, ASI leaves the planet. AI leaves us. Like AI doesn't really want anything to do with us anymore. And there's just a bunch of different scenarios, and I have that chapter will be completely trying to cover as many different scenarios as I could possibly think of. But most of them don't actually end in extinction, and human extinction doesn't actually make a lot of sense. Unless obviously the robot doesn't know what it's doing and it's just following an algorithm, which to me is not AI. That's an algorithm that was given too much authority before it was actually AI.
Wow,
so that's just my opinion on it. Yeah,
it's very fascinating for sure. And I think to end off, what do you think is something that about AI that mainstream news isn't talking about?
I would say that they're definitely not talking about how AI. Well, I think how AI is, as I mentioned before, is more familiar than it isn't. It's something that, and that's something I want to try to impress more on people, because I think fear of the unknown is probably one of the worst reactions anyone could have to any opportunity. I think, because I see this as a huge opportunity, even though it's scary. I think that, for example, some people might refuse to use AI just because they don't know about it, or these are the other things, or they don't think they're going to be good at using it. And I think that that's just it definitely is not the way to kind of go about an opportunity. And I don't want legislation to kind of limit what we are able to do for ourselves using AI. I do think that the way business is going about it and other things, that's what else can you expect? But I think that the biggest application of AI that will become apparent in the next few years will be using it to really learn about yourself, learn what you're capable of, learn new things, really unlock your own potential. Whether that is in the form of like starting a new business, or if that's just literally overcoming some sort of trauma you might have had because you just never looked at yourself introspectively like that. I think those are the most important things that will be coming out of AI that no one wants to talk about. They always want to talk about what can you do to be awesome, how can you be relevant, don't be behind. It's like, why don't you just try to use this resource in a way? I mean, like a good example is the Replica app. The Replica was one of the first apps that was trying to make you basically be your AI boyfriend, girlfriend. I found it very interesting. It did have a dirty mode that they eventually got rid of. Yeah, it was super weird, but it was, what I did find is it felt like when I used it, it actually felt like a journal, but an interactive journal. Because it would genuinely be like, hey, how was your day? It would actually remember what happened, like what you talked about yesterday, and so it would be like you met, because you can say like, oh, remind me that I want to do this. And then you check in with it the next day and it's like, oh, so how was, your conversation with your mom or something like that? Like, how'd that go? Like, you're supposed to, like, you told me you were supposed to do that today. And it's like, oh, like, what were you worried about? Like, and I think it almost, I don't know who programmed it to be kind of therapy like, but I think it was designed just to kind of keep you talking and journal. Which I think is one of the, I think that's an incredible use, an underrated use of AI, in my opinion. So that I think is really using AI to, and it's not often advertised as something that can really unlock the potential of each individual. It's really used as this kind of buzzword technology that if you don't, jump on the bandwagon, you're behind kind of thing. And I think the internet definitely was similar in that regard. Like, people were like, get on the internet, and if you don't, well, you're just a Luddite. And I'm sure some people have felt that way, but I would really hope that's more people are open to not view it this way, because I mean the way that internet was, because I think there's so much opportunity and like growth that can be like, it's just so much faster. Like I think, I mean, like it might not be a friend, but it definitely feels like one, which is like, that's just the human part of us. Like, and if we can suspend our belief enough to kind of use that to our own advantage, I think that's incredible.
Yeah, I think if I take away one thing from today in our conversation, it's just like using it for the opportunities that it could bring upon us. I
Yes,
think being scared of it is going to leave you behind, because it is a very useful resource that you can
yeah,
use to learn whatever, have that conversation with yourself that you never had before, and it's you can learn so many
exactly.
interesting things, and it's
Right.
definitely have
And
a
no
different
judgment.
outlook for sure. Yeah, no judgment as
And
well. I
no
think
judgment.
that's
Like
super
you can
important.
ask the dumbest questions that you want. Like it won't make you feel stupid. I mean, unless you ask it to. Like I did train one to verbally abuse me. So that it would just be like, you little piece of crap, like what do you do? And like all the time. And I was just like, I just wanted to see if it could be done. It was kind of
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, some people are into that.
Uh,
I mean, maybe that motivates a bit. But Thom
right?
Morgan, yeah, Thom Morgan, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you spending this time with me today and having this conversation. Where can people keep up with you, especially for when you release your book?
All right. Yeah, absolutely. It was such a pleasure being on the show with you.
Is there anywhere that you want people to check out your book once it comes out? Any social
Uh,
media and stuff
I,
like that?
I'm getting pretty procrastinating on it. Trying to get it finished, but I don't think I'm going to be like marketing it or anything. Like I do make apps as well. Not as meaningful. Like I've released an app called Drunk Mode for iOS.
Okay.
And I am going to rebrand one that used to be a news app as something called the Timeline. And that'll just be it'll be kind of, I mean, the main center of the timeline will just literally be I'm going to start with just AI, but it will be actual, like not necessarily news articles because you don't read them, but like actual time, like events and time that will be confirmed, like this is when it happened. And then you could probably view timelines like side by side. Like if you wanted to see all of the Google updates for AI and all of the Meta AI, and then Apple is like, you'd see Google, Meta, and then nothing, and then Apple, like,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
It took Apple quite a bit of time to get into the game.
Yeah. Definitely.
Um, but yeah, and so I mean, those apps I don't really market. I think I just kind of like naturally hope people find them if they want them, and I think the same would go for this book. I'm not looking really for sales as much as just having something out there for people who might want to read it.
Gotcha. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Such a pleasure.
And thank you.